let's go ahead and take a look at the quick mask mode and what that means. So before I just dive right into that, let's clean up a little bit where I was. I'm just going to deselect, Control D. I'm going to grab this layer mask and throw that away. Boom, it's gone. Delete. And what happens, I haven't shown you what happens if I apply it. Let me duplicate this layer. Just going to undo, duplicate this layer. So I have this copy. If I were to drag it and instead I go, oh, I'll apply, boom, what just happened? I now permanently have a hole where the mask was. It actually erases and deletes it. In other words, applying a layer mask is the same thing as deleting that data, deleting that information. On the previous one, you can see how I could hold down, I could disable the layer mask, and I can do that by shift-clicking, boom, or shift-clicking again to re-enable it. Can't do that on this new one. There's no layer mask to shift-click. It's just gone. It's destroyed. Let me throw that away. Gone. All right. Now, as I was saying, let me throw away this mask. Delete. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And here we are. So how does the quick mask mode work? This thing is pretty cool. If I click the quick mask mode, everything looks normal, except I'm again in a black and white. And on my channels palette, you'll see that I now have a quick mask that's active. If I were to take a brush, and in this case, I'm going to set this to be a soft brush, and there are a bunch of ways I can do that. For example, I can come up to the brush, open it up, drop the hardness down. That'll work great. I can also Alt, right-click, and drag. I prefer this because I can see how hard it is. It's a little more meaningful to me than 15% hardness. All right, and now I'm painting, and it appears to be painting with pink or with red. Now, what's the point to that? Well, the point of it is this. If I were to get out of quick mask mode, I have a selection, but not just any selection. This is feathered by 15%, just as the hardness on the brush was only 15%. Great, so really, we can paint selections. That's actually wildly useful, but how does that apply to masks? Remember, selections and masks can be converted back and forth. They're essentially the same thing. So if I were to click on this, and I'm going to actually Alt-click, I want to preserve what I have selected. Alt-click. Look at that. I faded it away. So that's what the quick mask mode is. It's a way to paint selections. So it gets a little more interesting when you start with a selection. Let me delete this layer mask real quick. Let's say I began with a selection. I'm just going to use the rough lasso for the demonstration instead of a fancy tool like the magic wand or any of those things. Now if I go to quick mask mode, now this is more interesting. Notice that I have the selection painted in. So let's try one more thing. I'm going to exit quick mask mode, come back to the selection. If I were to go to my select, modify, feather, Shift F6, and crank it up to 15% feather, and enter quick mask mode, notice it's the same fuzzy effect. So I can literally paint in and out with different types of brushes. That selection, I can also take a selection and edit it. So now if I were to come back out of quick mask mode, voila, the selection's edited. Now the applications to this get way more interesting. Let's say I get a brush that has like a dry media brush, and I use it on this thing. Let me make the brush a little bit bigger though. Painting in white to deselect, and I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. White to select and black to deselect. I can start to get some really zany effects. So I can follow edges if I want. I'm just using the spacebar key to move around while I brush stuff in. And if I want to have some strange effects on the inside, I'll just flip my colors, X on the keyboard, bring in some of these. Great. All right, so I have a crazy, crazy thing happening here. Get out of quick mask mode, boom, it's a selection. So if I were on a new layer, I could fill that and have all kinds of weird goo. That's not too interesting. That's all like brushing. But if I were on an already existing layer, and instead I were to create a mask, and again, I'm going to hold down the Alt key this time, boom. I should not have held down the Alt key this time. I will step back. I will just add a new layer mask, Boom. Look at this crazy thing. Look at that. Wild, right? So you can start getting some interesting effects and bringing things in and out. So you may ask yourself, what's the point of that? Well, that's because the structured image is what I was masking. What if I had the unstructured image instead masked? That's a little more interesting, I think. And if I were to move this around now, I have a really weird shape, but I have a weird shape that can still be edited. Edited. That's a great word. All right. So that's essentially the quick mask. It's a way to edit selections, and once you have a selection, you can convert it to an actual mask instead of the quick mask. It's also a way to create selections whole cloth. So that's about the quick mask, but there's still one other mask, which is the clipping mask, and I will show that to you in the next video.